So, hi everyone, and welcome to today's Motivation Assist podcast. I'm Aisling Connolly, Clinics Director, joined by Jodie Wood, our consultant nutritionist at Motivation. And we thought that today, considering children are back to school, I think most schools this week, I know there's a few not back till next week, but I think most are back to school this week. We thought, myself and Jodie thought it might be nice and helpful to give you some tips on basically lunch boxes, getting back into a school routine with our children. So we thought maybe in order of when we wake up, Jodie, we're going to talk about breakfast, the most important meal of the day. And I know a lot of us are working parents. We run out the door. And I know still it's quite shocking, Jodie, and I know you're aware also, the amount of families who skip breakfast.
Absolutely. And that seems to fall down to the kids as well. Lots of kids end up grabbing a croissant on the way to school in the car or a cereal bar and don't get a proper breakfast in the morning, unfortunately. And breakfast time can be very hectic, meaning we often do reach for sugary cereals that our kids are screaming for, or we put together packed lunches in a rush that maybe aren't based on ideally what we would like them to be if we had more time to prepare. And it's hard also to think of varied lunches, and your kids complain that they're sick of having the same things time and time again, and it really can be the bane of a tired parent's morning. So we thought we would give you a couple of tips today, and the first thing I think we should really touch on is these breakfast cereals that we see kids sitting down to for 5-10 minutes rushing through every morning. And if we just think of even a couple of the most popular breakfast cereals that are on the market and specifically aimed at kids, so something like Cocoa Pops, I'll just give you a kind of brief background. So the World Health Organization recommends that children have no more than 6 teaspoons of sugar a day. And that's added sugar we're talking about. So the World Health Organization recommends that a child should have no more than really 25 grams, which is about 6 teaspoons of sugar a day. And when we talk about that, we're talking about free sugar. So added sugar, honey, and the sugar that comes from fruit juice. So if we think you're trying to aim for 6 teaspoons a day. So if we look at some of the most popular breakfast cereals on the market, and specifically ones that are kind of advertised targeting kids. Let's take Cocoa Pops, for example. So when you're reading the back of a nutrition label and you're looking at sugar, you always want to look at the value per 100 grams. So anything over 5 grams per 100 grams is classed as being high in sugar. Cocoa Pops, for example, has 17 grams per 100 grams, so that would equate to roughly 1.5 teaspoons of added sugar per bowl every morning. Crunchy Nuts, for example, contain a whopping 4 teaspoons of sugar per bowl every morning. So if you think that your child is not meant to have more than 6 in total a day, and you're starting them off with a bowl of cereal that contains over half of that, you're already on a downward spiral.
Wow, I'm just thinking already, and we've talked about hypoglycemia, Jodie. When you're talking about sugars, amount of sugars, as you are, I've seen children who are so sensitive. Like my own children wouldn't have a lot of sugar, but you give them a cereal like that, they're hyper.
Absolutely,
they're going out the door hyper, and then they're going to dip later in the day.
If you think that they're going into the classroom wired on sugar, and then an hour or two later they're going to get this crash and experience this hypoglycemia, where their mood will change, their concentration will lag, everything you really want to avoid when a child is sitting down in the classroom. So starting them off with a breakfast that's not sugar based, that's protein based, is the best thing we can do for them in the morning. So offering them something like scrambled eggs or boiled eggs, or even a bit of cheese on toast, anything to get a little bit of protein into them in the morning, combined with the low GI carbohydrates, is something whole grain that will release energy slowly.
So what you're saying, Jodie, for our listeners again, just to recap on that, is be aware of there are huge amounts of sugar.
Absolutely.
And then children, I've seen children and I know of children who add sugar on top of that.
Yeah.
So overall, you're saying a protein breakfast, as in your egg or your scrambled egg or whatever. Now, I know, and I hear a lot of parents in the clinic, also not only for children, for parents, again, we're running out the door, will say, well, I don't have time to boil an egg or, to do this in the morning time. Now, I know we have often suggested, well, you can always boil an egg the night before.
Absolutely. And it really does take the difference of getting up 5 or 7 minutes earlier to scramble an egg and put some toast in the toaster for your child. And if you think about the benefit for them, it's really worth the extra couple of minutes. Go to bed a little bit earlier the night before and have everything prepped, your eggs and your toast ready to go in the morning. So you just have to turn on the water, turn on the toaster, and you're halfway there.
And prep is the key, really, isn't it?
Prep is the key.
Yeah, prep is the key.
And that goes for lunchboxes as well.
Yeah.
There's no reason you can't prep a lunchbox the night before once your kids have gone to bed and you have maybe an hour or two to yourself. Take that 10 minutes to get your lunchbox prepped, and then that takes a little bit of the hassle out of the next morning.
And with lunch boxes, it's interesting. We were just saying there with regard to children, their energy levels dropping, their concentration dropping. And I know certainly with my own children, and I'd be very aware of putting protein, making sure like a little Baby Bell light or ham or whatever. I'd always have protein in their lunchbox. But I know my own children in primary school a couple of years ago, I did notice a couple of them coming home from school, coming in the door at 2 or 3 when they went at that time, and they were exhausted.
Absolutely.
So to me, that was a message to increase their protein, give them more protein, and by putting even just a protein bar simply into the lunchbox, I noticed the difference when they were coming home. They didn't have that tiredness, or you've mentioned, Jodie, lack of concentration. So certainly, and I think also the other thing before we I hand over and you give ideas with what to put into lunch boxes. If we think about children and the times that they eat. So let's say most families, we're talking about, it would be 8 o'clock breakfast, and then lunch, they have their mini break kind of around 11.
Yeah.
Lunch then would be 12. And then there's nothing between 12 and then, on average, children may be collected, say, at 2 or at 3, some at 4. There's nothing between that lunch hour break, 12,
Absolutely.
and the 3 or 4. Very long gap. So therefore, the hypoglycemia, which we've talked about, would kick in. So, again, we say to adults on the program as well as addressing children, back to what we've talked about, Jodie, time and time again, protein every 3 to 4 hours. It's back to basics and back to like when we're feeding babies.
Absolutely. And if you think when your child's blood sugar drops too low, so if they're not having enough protein or a low GI source of carbohydrate, their brain cells and their muscles don't have enough energy to function at full capacity. So glucose is important for helping your child's brain grow normally. And when a child ingests a meal that is based on refined sugar instead of a slow-releasing, low GI carb, this causes the spikes and rapid drops in blood sugar levels that we want to avoid. So lots of people may have noticed that your child might be saying they're hungry and they start to get agitated or a bit anxious or weak even and lethargic and maybe a little nauseous or headachy. These are all symptoms of hypoglycemia that we want to avoid, especially in the classroom.
And then with regard to lunch boxes, I know the listeners out there, Jodie, would be delighted if you would like to give some suggestions of what we can put into the lunch boxes without the children becoming bored or, things
Absolutely.
that they like.
So just a couple of things we'll touch on to avoid before we get into the good stuff. What you were saying there about protein bars are a great option. Choose a protein bar that's low in sugar and providing them with a good source of protein. Swap that for a cereal bar. Like we're so used to seeing these kind of oat-based cereal bars that parents think are healthy because you would if you just believed the marketing that was given to you and you didn't know what to look for. If we look at the leading cereal bar that a lot of parents will pop into lunch boxes, it's honey and oat based. It is a 2-bar serving. In those 2 bars, children are getting 7 teaspoons of sugar. So that's more than their recommended intake.
Crazy.
Just in the 2 bars. So if you swap that for a protein bar, you're already on a good start. And if we remove things like fruit juices and Capri Sun, for example, the 200 ml pouch contains 2.5 teaspoons of added sugar. Wow. So swapping that for something simple like water, and if they won't drink water or they don't like the taste, you can add in a little bit of sugar-free cordial. There's lots of them on the market now. And then if we go back to what to put into the lunchbox, so there is nothing wrong with the sandwich. You can make an easy swap your white sliced pan for a low GI option like spelt bread or rye bread. Anything whole grain is always great to put in. You can pop in things like breadsticks with chopped up vegetables and a little pot of hummus maybe. If you're going to pop a yogurt in, again, look for one with no added sugar. If we take Petit Flou, for example, one of those tiny pots has over a teaspoon of sugar in it, added sugar again. So swap that for a yogurt that has no added sugar, and you can sweeten that with some fresh fruit. Fresh fruit doesn't have the same effect on blood sugar that a fruit juice does, so there's no problem with popping a few berries in with some natural yogurt. And then aside from things like sandwiches, other lunch options would be pita breads or wraps. Again, choose low GI whole grain options. We have lots of recipes on our website for things like protein power bowls that are oat-based but are not completely laden with sugar. And seed bars as well are another great one to make at home, and that's a nice way to get your kids involved in the kitchen. You know, you can make them at the weekend and have a batch to pop in all through the week.
And I think that's important, Jodie, what you said, also get the kids involved, because I think research has actually shown that if children are involved in making meals, they're more likely to eat it themselves.
Yeah.
And colour is important. I know I was doing something last night. I have this thing that there has to be, and my girls will tell everybody, I go mad if there's no green on a plate, even if it is a little piece of parsley. And I always think of, the tricolour, it's, your colours. And colours are appealing to children. So I think certainly when you're saying there, get the children involved. And also because there's no home economics is not compulsory anymore, even more reason to bring your kids into the kitchen, and don't be afraid to just give them the spoon, let them stir, let them chop, let them get totally involved. So dinner then, we're back to the times that we eat dinner. So again, I know there's a lot of working parents maybe listening. What time do we actually sit down and have dinner? So there's a little motto in my head always there, feed the kids first. So just again, make sure it is every 3 to 4 hours. So it mightn't be your sit down family dinner. And that's another thing that I think is we're missing that nowadays, sitting together at the table. So even if mum and dad or whoever it is coming into the house are not actually going to be sitting till 7, make sure the kids have something when they come in from school, be it 4 or whatever time. And then still, I think it's important to sit down as a family.
I think so.
Together, dad might be only coming in the door then, or I'm only coming in the door, but bring your kids together and let them have something small, a small snack. I think we've missed that. We're losing out on that.
And I think especially for older kids, it is so nice to sit down and have your meal all together as a family. So if that means when you do the school run and you collect your children, be it at 2:30, 3, 4, give them a snack then. And then that will bring them through until dinner at 6:30, 7. It's really about establishing routine. If you have a pattern where you're eating dinner and breakfast, lunch and your snack, everything at a similar time every day, your metabolism will adjust to that, and there's no reason you can't give your kids their dinner at 7 p.m. with your partner and yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I know my girls do it. Certainly we've brighter evenings, evenings can get darker, but they will always go out after dinner and have a little run around or jump on the trampoline, not too soon after, we'd have to let the food go down. But, it's nice to get out, because I think, we can do another whole podcast on that exercise. We do not have, enough exercise, I feel, in schools nowadays, or games or sports. So, and I think also when we're talking about family, we need to be an example as parents.
Absolutely.
We need to, again, time, I'm hearing it more and more in the clinic, parents saying, I don't have time. But, even if it's not the weekdays, there is absolutely no reason that we cannot get out as a family and go up the forest or go for a walk together. So, routine, that can become a routine. And then the other thing is sleep. To finish
really
off,
important.
Very important. What is our bedtime routine like? So, you know, and I mean proper sleep. Another podcast we could do on getting the phones out of the room, make sure it is proper sleep, and our own sleep, because sleep actually is a trigger for hunger.
That's
it will
correct.
cause hunger.
Absolutely, and it can cause anxiety and agitation when children are not getting enough sleep, and especially when they've been off for this long break over the summer, where lots of them have had 3 months off, and bedtime is not as routine as it is during the school year. We see kids going to bed later and maybe not getting up at the time they would be when they're going to school during term. So really in the week leading up to going back to school, it's important to try and get back into a sleep routine and establish the time pattern that works best for your children during term.
Super. So Jodie, thank you. I hope between the two of us we've given some good tips to you listeners. And thank you for listening to this week's Motivation Assist podcast. Please do stay tuned for the next episode.